Hello and welcome to Scale Stuff. In this week's video I'm going to be building and reviewing the JB Models 176 scale long wheelbase Land Rover with soft top. I've always been a fan of Land Rovers. My first ever driving attempt was in one of these. I crashed it into a cone. Good times. Regardless though, I've been after one of these for my Cold War collection for a while, and this bargain bin find will do quite nicely fill in that gap. In the box you get a sheet of black and white instructions, a small decal sheet containing a load of registration plates, a singular sprue set to build the vehicle, and some clear parts for the windows. A first quick look at the sprue shows that it's very crisp and clean. There's a tiny bit of flash, but nothing drastic is jumping out at me. Looking at this sprue, it's a shame that JB Models went bust. For an older model, it's looking very nice. This tooling was later bought up by Airfix, so it'll be interesting to get hold of one of these later kits to see how the tooling has aged. This model was first released in 1992, and it looks pretty good for a tooling of its time. Anyway, onto the build. First thing on the menu is the lower part of the Land Rover. The parts here fall into place. The fit on this old model feels very precise. Before assembly, I did do a bit of cleanup, but this was minimal. I've not tackled the ejection pin marks on a lot of these bits, as I get the feeling they really won't be viewable when the model's put together. One bit to watch out for here is to make sure the rear panel goes in the right way up, and that's lights up. On this stage, the kit also wants me to add some clear parts, but I'm going to leave them off until later. Next, the kit has you build the windshield area. Only thing really to do here is cut down the steering column to 5mm. Other than that, this whole step is short and sweet. Again, the instructions want me to add clear parts, but again, I'm going to leave them off. This is how the dash and windshield are looking when they've been put together. Now it's time to add the rear seats and steps to the back. With them on, it's onto the front of the Land Rover. Again, all nice and simple here. One thing to watch though, don't try adding the bonnet before the windshield part, as it won't fit. With these bits on, the Land Rover's really starting to take shape. Now it's time to sort out the rear of the Land Rover. Firstly, I'm gluing the canvas roll to the back of the soft top. I'm not gluing this onto the main body yet, as it will be easier to paint it with it off. Here I'm just dry fitting this onto the body so I can line up where these little side bits go. Lastly now, I'm adding the chassis. I'm leaving the wheels off as well to aid in painting them later on. But with that on, that completes the main build of this kit. This was a nice relaxing build with nothing really major to report. Now it's onto the painting. For the base coat on the main Land Rover, I'm going to be using Humbrol 155 Olive Drab, and for the canvas soft top, I'm going to be using Tamiya TS3 Dark Yellow spray paint. As always, I'm spraying these bits up off screen and outside to avoid fumigating myself. This is what the kit's looking like with the base coats down. Now it's time to get the brushes out. The first thing I'm addressing on this model is the tyres. These I'm painting with Vallejo Matte Black. While the tyres are drying and the black paint's on the brush, I'm adding the camo. I love the look of the Cold War black and green camo. I'm not sure why, but I get the feeling it's because this stuff was all over the place when I was a kid going around air shows and things like that. Next, I'm painting up the seats. For this, I'm using Tamiya XF24 Dark Grey. Having seen the seats in real life, this grey is a little bit too dark, but yeah, I'm not a perfectionist. Internal details done though, now it's time to add the clear window parts, very carefully to avoid getting glue on them. Here I'm using old Tamiya glue rather than the new stuff, as the old glue seems a lot thicker and yeah, seems easier to control. The side window clear bits are going on well, even with a coat of paint on the frame. The front windshield pieces need a little bit of a squeeze though. But with those bits on, now I can add the canvas back to the main Land Rover body. This kit's really starting to come together now. Now, as it's late while filming this step, I'm adding the side wheels to the Land Rover so they can get a good bit of drying time overnight. The bonnet wheel I'm still not adding yet though, as it will get in the way of later dry brushes. Base shades mostly on, it's time to give the model its first wash. For this I'm using watered down matte black. This model really needed this wash to darken down the base paint, as 155 is a little bit too green for a Cold War British camo. Darkened down though, it looks about right. Wash dry, it's time to give the Land Rover its dust coats. For the first dry brush I'm doing the standard skeleton bone. With this one, I'm going to go heavier on the canvas area to make this area look a little bit dusty. Once the skeleton bone's on, I go over the lower part of the Land Rover and all of the metal bits in some Army Painter Elf Green. I really like this as a dry brush, as adding it over skeleton bone gives the model a worn and faded look. With that done, I'm returning to the canvas covering. After looking at more reference pictures, I think I overdid it here with the dry brush and made it too light. So what I'm doing now is darkening this bit down with a thin wash of Elf Green mixed with BS Dark Earth. That's the thing with painting. As long as you don't panic, most things can be washed darker or dry brush lighter. With most of the base colours done, now it's time to paint up the lights and headlamps on the Land Rover. These bits are tiny, but it's nice to have a little bit of interest to pick out a few details on this small model. Next, I'm adding the decals. The decals in this kit have a lot of carrier film, and I mean a lot. More than some of the Airfix kits I've seen. This is easy to trim off, but other than that, the decals are nice and thin and go on well. Now it's time to add some panel lines to the model. For this, I'm using slightly watered down matte black and a very fine brush. With this, I'm going around any bits where on the real Land Rover there will be a gap or joining parts, as this model is too small to have real shadows of its own, so you have to add them in yourself. Next, I'm adding a mud coat to the Land Rover. For this, I'm using BS Dark Earth. I'm going easy on this model as it's only small. One area I'm giving a bit more attention to though is the canvas roof. I'm using a light wash of BS Dark Earth here to give the canvas a bit more depth. But with that on, I think we're going to call this model done. This is how the Land Rover's looking. I'm very happy with how this small model has come out. In conclusion, the JB Models soft top Land Rover is a lovely kit that goes together very easily. This model would be great for a beginner. The only two things to watch out for when making this kit would be the rear panel placement and making sure the glass goes in glue free. Though JB Models is no longer making model kits, I'm glad Airfix bought this tooling, as it would have been a shame if this little gem wasn't available to buy anymore. At some point, I do want to take a look at the Airfix re-release to see how the tooling's aged after 30 years. This model cost me £4 second hand, which I think is a bargain, but paying anything under a tenner for this kit would be a fair price, as it's only small. Anyway, that's my build and review of the 176 scale long wheelbase Land Rover Defender by JB Models. As always, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful if you're building or thinking of buying this kit at home. Until next time though, look after yourselves and have a good one. Goodbye.